Everything was quiet as Roderick strode through the abandoned city streets. Too quiet. He stopped for a moment and took in his surroundings, every sense of his focused sharp in an attempt to detect the telltale signs of an impending clown ambush. The squeak of a rubber nose, the scent of cotton candy mixed with blood, or maybe just that eerie feeling one gets when the hairs on the back of the neck stand on end in anticipation of something wacky about to happen. And then, all of a sudden, from around the corner came a pair of humanoid figures. They were dressed in black and white striped shirts and wearing berets, riding on a tandem invisible bike. Roderick ground his teeth. Mimes. While the garden variety circus clown was the most common menace in this post-apocalyptic wasteland, there were other variations as well, such as this particularly irritating strain which had originated in France and migrated to the rest of the world. Though not as savage and dangerous as their big-top brethren, mimes were not a threat to be taken lightly, as Roderick well knew. Though most of their props were imaginary, their threat was very real, and perhaps, worst of all, they seemed somehow resistant to most forms of damage. That wasn't to say they were invulnerable. No, Roderick had killed mimes before with a wide variety of implements, including guns, explosives, fire, electricity, extreme blunt trauma, edged weapons, chainsaws, industrial and farm machinery, silverware, and trombones, to name a few. They just took a long time to die. Much like in the days before the clown apocalypse, mimes were hard to get rid of and tended to overstay their welcome. One thing that Roderick noted seemed to help, though, was dispatching them with silenced weapons. Quickly, he produced his trusty revolver and, with his lips pressed together in a grim line, screwed on the barrel-shaped apparatus. The mimes dismounted their invisible bike. They pointed at Roderick and scuttled in his direction. "Here we go," thought Rothschild, preparing himself for the impending performance of climbing invisible ladders, pulling imaginary threads attached to lips, and being trapped in invisible boxes. Mimes were just as sadistic as their circus counterparts. They liked to torture their prey before they killed it. Roderick decided to let them have their fun for a while. Their intent was to mesmerize him, to cause him to let down his guard, but by watching their ridiculous performance, he, in turn, caused them to let down theirs. They didn't know whom they were dealing with. Roderick bit his lip, trying his best to endure the pain of watching the mime show as they went about their routine. They started by throwing an invisible ball back and forth, followed by drinking invisible coffee or munching on invisible apples. This, in turn, was followed by an act of Roderick didn't know what, where one of the mimes pretended to be putting on invisible hats or something. At this point, Rothschild's sanity had been pushed almost to its breaking point. He wasn't sure he could endure much more, and yet he knew he had to. The perfect moment to strike was almost there. All he had to do was wait out this awful onslaught just a little bit longer. Finally, after one of the mimes finished leaning on an invisible wall while checking its invisible watch, the moment came. The two performers, satisfied their prey had let down his guard, closed in for the kill. But Roderick was ready for them. "Hey," he said, causing the two mimes to step back. Looks of genuine surprise crossed their faces for a fleeting second before they regained their creepily friendly composures. "I know mimes aren't really big on verbal jokes, but I've got one for you all the same." The mimes looked at one another simultaneously, then back at Roderick, nodding their heads eagerly. "What's black and white and red all over?" Again they looked at each other, then back at Roderick, both shrugging their shoulders in tandem. Roderick pulled out his weapon. "A mime that's just been shot in the head." "Oh, one of the mimes began to exclaim, but its cry was cut short by the piff-piff of Roderick's silenced firearm. "Looks like the only invisible boxes you'll be trapped in now," he said, stepping over their bodies, "are coffins." Roderick thought for a minute. Was that actually clever? For that matter, was it even grammatically correct? Not like it mattered anyway. There was no one there to hear him. Roderick continued moving through the city ruins. For some time it had been relatively peaceful, and he was unmolested by clowns. That's how it usually was. Long periods of mind-numbing monotony punctuated with short periods of absolute terror. Roderick would often use these swaths of downtime to hone his combat skills or forage for food. Today he decided to do the latter. As terrible as this new world was, one thing which it had going for it was the availability of sustenance. Countless supermarkets had been simply abandoned, leaving a rich supply of canned food free for the taking. Best of all, this food was untouched by the clowns. They had little interest in the victuals of men, with the exception of fast food and candy, especially nougat circus peanuts, which, as far as Roderick was concerned, they could have. Circus peanuts were only one step up the edibility chart from rusty nails. It wasn't long before he found a supermarket. Speedway Food Stores announced its sign. The soft red glow that once lit up the letters of the store's name had all burned out, save for the word food, and now the curve on the D had gone out as well, leaving only fool. Roderick pushed his way through the now-dead automatic door and into the eerily deserted aisles of the supermarket. Even here he didn't let his guard down. The clowns could be hiding anywhere. He made it a point to stay clear of the meat, dairy, and frozen sections, as the food there had gone bad long ago. Instead, he searched for canned soup. What would be the main course today? Chicken noodle? Garden vegetable? Maybe even New England clam chowder. His mouth began to water as he considered the possibilities. In the end, he decided on chunky sirloin burger. It was hard to go wrong with chunky sirloin burger. Sure, it wasn't as exciting as grilled chicken Italiano, but it was always a good choice, and Roderick knew it wouldn't let him down. Chunky sirloin burger was reliable, faithful. There were a few things in this world one could trust, but one could always trust chunky sirloin burger. Roderick dined in the store's employee lounge, rounding out the meal with a can of fruit cocktail and some orange tang for vitamin C. His belly full and his strength rejuvenated, Rothschild made for the exit. He stopped momentarily on his way out as his gaze happened to cross a corporate poster on the wall. On it was the face of a well-groomed, apron-wearing grocer, her perfectly white teeth slightly visible beneath a pleasant grin. Only someone, or something, had altered it. By taking red paint or lipstick or something else, they had painted over the model's smile so that it now resembled a maniacal and ghastly clown rictus. Above it were the words, "Service with a smile," though someone had crossed out the word smile and replaced it with clown. That didn't even make any sense, Roderick thought with contempt. He walked out of the store, but not before tearing down the poster, crumpling it up, and throwing it on the floor. Roderick Rothschild pressed on, walking through the deserted city streets, the last man in a world gone mad. Suddenly, he heard a sound that set him on edge. Only moments before, he had been walking peacefully among the dilapidated and gutted husks of the great steel giants that populated this once bustling metropolis, contemplating his future and his course of action. Now every nerve was alive as adrenaline surged through his veins in preparation for an oncoming onslaught of violence and low-brow slapstick comedy. Beep, beep! The cheerful noise which issued from down one of the numerous side streets made Roderick's blood run cold and begin to boil both at once. "Clown car," he growled as he cocked his shotgun. "Vroom! Scree!" The sound of squealing rubber heralded the arrival of the chariot of doom as the tiny beetle-shaped car zoomed out into view. It was painted in garish shades of yellows and greens, with pink, red, and blue flowers that adorned it like festering boils. A large key stuck out of the back of the vehicle, rotating slowly in time with the workings of the machination of doom. Typically, the arrival of such a carriage of mirth and mayhem signaled the death of any in the area, as a chuckling tide of clowns would emerge from the tiny vehicle in droves and overwhelm any unfortunate enough to be in the vicinity. But Roderick knew how to deal with such problems. Quickly, he snatched a grenade from the bandolier on his chest. He pulled the ring out with his teeth and tossed it at the approaching deathmobile. Kaboom! The clown car erupted into a cloud of flame. In a few seconds, the street would be filled with the burning bodies of bozos as they crawled from the flaming death trap to writhe on the ground in agony. Not all the seltzer water bottles in the world would be enough to save them from burning alive. As Roderick expected, a clown did come dashing out of the flames. Its arms waved wildly as it ran around in circles, shrieking in a tone that would curdle the blood of the devil himself. Moments later, the creature collapsed on the ground, convulsing as the flames consumed its body, turning the deathly white pallor of clown makeup into the sooty black of charred flesh. But no other clowns emerged. Roderick stopped for a moment to consider this. He had never seen such a thing before. Why would they waste an entire clown car for just one clown? And then his confusion turned to frustration. He had just wasted one of his grenades on it, too. Had he known... Suddenly a thought occurred to him. What if that was their intent? To make him use up his resources? Nah, that couldn't be it. Clowns weren't that smart. Sure, they were smarter than zombies or celebrities, but they still weren't smart enough to use strategy and planning. Unless... Vroom! Vroom! Scree! Beep, beep! Crap! Typically, in such moments, Roderick did more acting than thinking, but as he clutched at his bandolier for a fresh grenade, a horrible thought flashed through his mind. What if the clowns were adapting? Evolving even, like a virus, a ridiculous, ridiculous virus. And then his thoughts were stopped short. He couldn't find any more grenades. Had he used his last one? He glimpsed down at the numerous belts and straps which clung to his muscular frame. He did use his last grenade. Damn his luck. Roderick hated running. Not only was it cowardly, but it denied him the opportunity to purge the world of a few more bozos. But discretion was the better part of valor, after all, and Rothschild knew when to fold his cards. That time was now, because he had just been dealt a full hand of jokers. He turned about and began to sprint in the opposite direction just as the clown cars behind began to vomit out their hilarious payload of chuckling fools. It was difficult for them to run in those big red shoes of theirs, so if he ran fast, he could probably make it to safety. Then, suddenly, 2 more clown cars zipped out from opposing side streets in front of him, cutting off his route of escape. Roderick was flanked. This looked bad. Real bad. Well, there was no sense in running or begging for his life, Roderick reasoned, so if this is where he, the last sane man on Earth, was to meet his end, he'd go down fighting. And by God, he was going to take as many of the red noses with him as he could. He pulled the shotgun off his back, the one with the sawed-off barrel and the words "Comedy Killer" carved crudely into the stock. He pumped it with grim purpose, sending a shell into the chamber, his jaw set with fatal determination. "Come on, clowns," he snarled. The doors of the clown-mobiles opened up, and out began to spill the troop of Pierrots. Fat clowns, skinny clowns, clowns with tiny umbrellas, even sad clowns. Roderick hated them all, and he was determined to end the lives of as many of them as he could before they pulled him apart like a fleshy piece of saltwater taffy. But they never got the chance. From out of an alleyway behind the fools issued the angry scream of a motorcycle. Seconds later, the sleek machine rocketed into view, arcing through the air before landing on the ground. The rider, an individual in a dingy leather jacket whose face was hidden by the visor of his helmet, turned to the bike in an abrupt J-motion, bringing it around to face the rear of the encroaching clown horde. The rider reached behind him, quickly grasping a package secured to the rear of his vehicle. "Hey, clowns!" came a strong, feminine, and curiously familiar voice from within the rider's helmet. "It's playtime!" With that, the rider tossed the package toward the gag men before whipping the bike around and speeding away. The package landed with a thud on the pavement and began issuing forth the familiar, lilting tune of a jack-in-the-box. The clowns, enraptured by the package, momentarily forgot about their quarry and their impending victory over their deadliest foe. The music of the jack-in-the-box reached its conclusion, at which point the top of the box flew open and the package discharged dozens of long, hot-dog-shaped twisty balloons, along with an explosion of confetti. "My God," Roderick said to himself, "it's like clown catnip." Roderick stood transfixed with a macabre sort of fascination at this awful spectacle, but quickly tore his gaze away. There was still another group of clowns flanking him, and he needed to escape now while the jokesters before him were momentarily distracted. Quickly, he began to scan the area, his survival instinct analyzing all possible routes of escape. And then he heard once more the familiar, haunting melody of the jack-in-the-box issuing forth from the package which the masked rider had thrown. Roderick wasn't quite sure what else was going to pop out of that box, but he was pretty sure that, whatever it was going to be a lot nastier than some spring-loaded clown, which was pretty nasty in and of itself. He began to sprint away, but that was leading him in the direction of the other clown troop. What to do? He decided that the best course of action was to get as far away from that box as possible, even if that meant getting a bit closer to the other clowns. He began to dash. Just then, the tune reached its end. Instinctively, Roderick dropped to the ground, covering his head with his hands. Boom! A wave of heat swept across the pavement, and Roderick was peppered with debris. Some of it was garbage, he had no doubt. Paper, empty cans, and the like, but other bits felt substantially more fleshy. Though Roderick shuddered at the thought of what they might have been, he wasted no time. Providence had given him a way out, and by God he was going to take it. He rose to his feet just in time to see a rolling cloud of flame and smoke and the smoldering body parts of bozos strewn about the ground. And then, suddenly, out of the inferno came his anonymous savior. She rode on her motorcycle while the smoke and flames rolled and churned behind her. With a sound of shrieking tires, she brought her bike to a halt in front of Roderick, the rear wheel of her cycle skidding on the pavement until the machine was perpendicular to him. "Get on, hurry," she said. Although Roderick was slightly perturbed at the concept of being rescued, let alone having to ride on the back of a motorcycle like someone's girlfriend, he was ever the pragmatist and wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. He did as he was instructed and hopped on the back of the vehicle. In an instant, the two of them were speeding away, leaving the remainder of the bloodthirsty clowns behind them. Thanks." It was difficult for Roderick to say, but she had saved his life. Fair was fair. When his mysterious benefactor failed to reply, he continued, "Listen, that was some damn fine work back there." "Thanks, big guy, but let's save the pleasantries for when we're a safe distance away from those jokers." How was that for a role reversal, Roderick thought, a woman telling a man that he was talking too much. That was just fine with him. He had never been one for conversation. The two of them sped off together in silence. After they traveled some distance, the rider brought her cycle to a halt. It was just outside a small park. "I think it's safe enough to take a break here," she said as she swung a leg up and over the cycle's frame. "Should be," agreed Roderick. The woman produced 2 bottles of water and tossed one to Rothschild. "You thirsty, big guy?" Big guy? Where had he heard that before? Someone used to call him that a long time ago. "I'm parched. So tell me, who are you? I thought I was the only one left." Roderick's benefactor undid her riding helmet and yanked it off her head, revealing a mane of sensible, jaw-length hair, which she shook as it came free of its confines. With a shock of surprise, Roderick's memory shot back to that time so long ago it might as well have been another world. That time when, instead of fighting clowns, he fought paperwork in a purgatory of cubicles. Here, standing before him, might as well have been a ghost, for indeed he had thought she had perished along with all the others. And yet there she was, in the flesh, her sharp features a little more haggard and a little more scarred, but still pretty, her smart gray business suit replaced with riding leathers, and her pencil replaced with a sawed-off shotgun. It was his old co-worker, Kathy.